morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's webinar on absence management. Hope you're well. Just to go through a few fundamentals first and welcomes. So I just wanted to introduce who I am and who the team are. So we are Clover HR. We have a team of around 35 of us around the Midlands and around the UK actually now, with a wealth of experience on all HR issues, including the employee life cycle and across all life sectors of the business. We recently achieved our ISO accreditation in 9001 in 2021, which we're very proud of, and hopefully this will demonstrate some of the commitment that we show to best practice and obviously professionalism to our clients and the high standard of expertise we achieve and the compliance we achieve as well. My name's Lynn. I'm HR Business Partner and Associate Director for Clover HR. I've been in HR for 23 years now, and I enjoy the subject. I enjoy passing on the knowledge, and hopefully today you'll find value added for you and your business. Welcome to ask any questions. I'll try and address them either throughout or at the end. Alternatively, you're welcome to contact me on my details after today or anyone at Clover, and we'll be happy to help you. You are on mute, just so I can get through the main bulk of the presentation, but alternatively, if you want to put anything in the chat options at the end, we can discuss offline afterwards. So the subject today is absence management. What we're going to go through, just to briefly show you what content we're going to cover, is absence management and what is it, short-term absenteeism, long-term absenteeism, mainly the differences within each one, and obviously tips to help manage each one. The effects of COVID and long COVID on absence and how this is becoming prevalent since the pandemic. And then a bit of a summary at the end to sum up exactly what we've talked about. I have got a bit of a poll question to ask you today. I'm going to look at the poll answers at the end, but I wanted to ask you, do you have in your business a robust absence management procedures in place, and do you feel confident they are being managed effectively? So I'm going to launch that poll. It's just for you, I've got some options for you to choose there. I'll launch that poll and I will look at them at the end just to see what the consensus is amongst us and to see whether we can help in any way. So firstly, some absence statistics. Thought this would be quite interesting to see really. And a recent annual CIPD survey said the main causes of sickness absence are minor illnesses such as colds, flu, stomach upsets, headaches. Then we're going down to musculoskeletal, back pain, neck pain, shoulder injuries. Third one on is stress. And obviously that is becoming more prevalent at the moment since the pandemic as well as during the pandemic. Mental ill health is very important to look at and can be just as costly, and absence stats prove it's physical and mental health issues, and care responsibilities for children. So when we look at what is absence management, it's a method of managing absence in work with policies, procedures and processes. It will help to reduce, by managing this, it will help to reduce the employee absenteeism. It's proven it will maximise productivity because you can, obviously more people that are on the job, but you're minimising the disruption to the productivity by managing it effectively. It's to support employees during their illness, injury or unforeseen circumstances. So you really have to manage this effectively and fairly. To discipline employees with questionable or excessive absences. A lot of absences are genuine. A lot could be time off for different things and using absence as the excuse. So you have to look for this and try and weigh up which options. The management of absence that can be long or short term and how it should be handled differently, because you have got differences in how you need to manage it. You need to strike a balance between supporting the employee, those employees who miss work due to illness, injury and unforeseen circumstances which are beyond our control. And then also disciplining employees whose absences are questionable or excessive or just not manageable for the business and too costly. Absence management always has to be managed fairly and consistently across the business. Otherwise, it can cause real issues and disgruntlement between employees, line managers and the business as a whole. When we look at short-term absence, Absence is divided into two categories of short and long term. In many cases, long term is harder to manage, harder to improve, with management methods than short term absence, because short term absence can be highly disruptive, as it interrupts productivity with no continuation or short term cover. You've got no guidance of how long it's going to last. There isn't a legal definition of what short-term absenteeism looks like. However, most employers define it to be an absence of less than 4 weeks. So sometimes it's a short-term illness that there's an end date to it. It doesn't tend to go on with a cold past a week or 2 weeks. So you have an end goal in mind, an end date to return. Obviously more disruptive to the business, because 1 day out can be just as disruptive as a week out in productivity and production lines. So this needs to be managed effectively. So some tips really to how to manage short-term absence. Ensure you have an absence policy that sets out the attendance expectations, any notification procedures that you expect the employee to follow, and the repercussions of not meeting these expectations. So it's important to meet the expectations with all employees for them to know where they stand, what will happen if the standards are not met. Ensure the employee calls themselves unless they're not able to. So it is important to talk directly with the employee and keep that communication channel. There should be very few reasons an employee cannot talk directly with you, obviously hospitalisation or a trauma or too upset. It would raise concerns if they couldn't discuss certain times, and there might be another reason for the non-attendance. So you may need to dig a bit deeper after the event here. So the expectations of calling themselves can be incorporated into the absence management procedure and be a criteria if this not followed. So text messages a lot of the time aren't acceptable. An employee needs to phone in and discuss with their employee what's wrong, what their likely return date is, and what they're doing about it. Ensure every absence is reported and monitored for absence data. So to keep a record to refer back to, and this should be used certainly for fairness and consistency, but also may be needed in legal proceedings later on down the line. Carry out a return to work interview after every absence. So a lot of the time these are missed, which can, by doing this, it doesn't help the procedure. By having a return to work interview can actually deter non-genuine absence from occurring, but also ensure in the year and make them aware how this fits in with your absence procedure, whether it's poor or standard or it needs to be addressed, what the next steps could be, and look for patterns of absence as well. Again, can be disciplined for this. Better to have this set out in a procedure. Some disciplinaries I've been involved in for absence, every Friday is the day that they have absence, and it just rings alarm bells to you as to what's going on. And you just need to look for these patterns. It could be genuine and might be something you need to look into there. Most important thing is consistency and fairness. Ensure you have the full story before making any judgments, and ensure everyone, including management, are treated the same way. This will stop disgruntlement. It will also help understand the full story and avoid prejudging the outcome of what you think or what you've heard. And that's why the communication on the return to work interview is so important, to check they're okay to be back at work and working effectively for you. You're not causing any further damage by them being back. So when we look at long-term absence and absenteeism, these health conditions vary really from accidents to physical illnesses, or from routine operations to mental illnesses. And management of a long-term absence, as I mentioned earlier, can be easier than short-term absence, as it is easier to plan. We tend to have an estimated length of absence, so an operation could take 6 weeks to recover from, and we know that in advance and we can plan for that as a business. Other things aren't as easy, and if it's a physical illness that has never come about before, we don't know how long the body will take to heal, or the doctors recommend, so we have to go on the communication channels with the employee and maybe experts within that medical field as well. Hopefully most workers recover and come back to work when they're well enough to work, and the tips that I'm going to follow with will help you to plan that. So again, you have to have a clear absence policy, have a clear policy and outlined in your handbooks, and also set reminders for your return to work so they know what is expected of them. Ensure the correct procedures are followed by all your line managers. So you may need to do training on an annual basis just to remind people if they don't have absence too often, what to do when they do. So ensure the employee and the employee follow the correct procedure. Return to work should be conducted and the employee made aware of what absence this is and that they are being monitored. It should also be clear to that the employer is supporting them and wants to know of any issues in returning or anything they should be aware of. Communication, again, ensure regular communication between employer and employee and agree the timeframes and regularity to keep in touch. The worst mistake for some employers to make is not keeping in contact with their employees while they're on long-term sick. This will make the employee feel out of the loop. The employee doesn't know what's going on. So set the next catch-up date at every communication when you speak to the employee so they know they are missed and are needed back, and we want them to return, and also they have an expectation of when they need to speak to you next. This ensures the planning is in process, and then the process is being followed effectively. Again, monitor absences using a scoring method. A lot of companies use Bradford factor, which gives a scoring method to show what points an employee is on, and able to see if there's an increase or a decrease and monitor it throughout, and talk to the employee about this as well. Keep notes of all meetings and phone calls and emails that you have, so you know what's been said by yourself and themselves. This is important to be able to follow up on actions. If you believe something was said, then you can follow up and reiterate to the employee what was said, and keep a dialogue of these events and conversations, dates, times, where, who was present. It just helps you further down the line if any procedures or disciplinary action was needed further down the line, or any legal proceedings that might come about in the future. It's always good to keep those notes. You might not remember 6 months ago what conversation was had, so those notes you can refer to. Seek external support, so medical reports, occupational health, HR support. Again, we are not medical experts in our field of work, and therefore cannot diagnose if someone is fit to return to work or not. We need to call in the help of the experts to help us understand what the issue is, what we can do about it, how we can support it, and how we can get the employee back to work if at all possible, and what the best next steps are for us to take. Remember, there is no qualifying, ask specific questions on disability. Again, long-term absences can fall into disability category. So although medical advice will always say that a final decision on disability will always lie with the tribunal, they will advise whether there is a likelihood that it is a disability or not, if asked directly. So remember, there's no qualifying period to retain rights. You are covered from the very start of your employment employment tribunal for disability, and job applications are also covered. So you really need to be mindful of this as an employer and ask the right questions and make the right adjustments. On potential return, consider a phased return or light duties if required. This is different for every single illness, as you can imagine. So this could work in the form of reducing the days, reducing the hours, reducing certain duties or the workload that is presented to the employee. Talk to the employee about how best to manage it and how they feel about their return. And if you've got buy-in from them, you're halfway there, and you're doing the right things, and get that agreement in place and put it in writing to say how it's going to look for the foreseeable, and then monitor it on a weekly, monthly basis to see how, or daily basis to see how it's going, and make adjustments if needed. We have a duty to make reasonable adjustments where a disability is identified. So employees have a duty to make those adjustments to support a disabled employee where a provision, criteria or practice or physical feature puts an employee to a substantial disadvantage. So we need to be mindful of this, and the only way we will get to grips with what the issues are is by talking to the employee, gaining the medical expertise around us, and putting those steps in place, and monitoring it and analysing it on a regular basis, and reviewing it with the employee to check in on them and they're okay with it and it's working effectively for all parties concerned. So within COVID, obviously the pandemic has changed the working world in many ways. So all industries have found a significant rise in absence due to COVID-19, and this continues, unfortunately. We need to treat each short-term case of COVID-19 now as you would any other absence. Long COVID has long-term effects and may be considered as disability in the future. So an estimated 1.3 million people have long COVID as of January 2022. So we really need to be mindful of this and what this looks like, how it will change our absence rates in the future, and what we can do about it as a business to support it. Treat this absence with care and ensure support is given throughout. Mental health issues have become more apparent during this time, and more mental health practitioners are out there helping. We're putting more wellbeing initiatives in place as an employer. And this is something we can definitely help you with to try and improve the employee benefits when it comes to mental health and the wellbeing that you support your employees with. Businesses have become more vigilant and supportive of the need to be proactive with mental health issues. So you could look to train a mental health first aider on your site or within your offices to help support your employees with any issues they may have. The coronavirus rebate sick pay scheme has now closed for employers to claim back SSP for individual absences from work due to COVID. So again, we need to treat it like any other absence now. It can't be helped. However, if you've got a COVID policy in place, that would be good so the employee knows what to do in the event of testing positive and what the business, the industry focuses on it and what the needs are. So in summary, long-term and short-term absence can be treated differently. This is important because they are different and they may need to have different needs. Again, every single one of them, every single absence needs a procedure in place and a proper process to be followed. So it's important to have that procedure in place and everyone understands expectations, what they should and shouldn't do in absence. Again, some managers might not have this from time to time, so it might be worth revisiting this and introducing the absence policy again, going through training, how to conduct a return to work interview, and really talking them through the different procedures and monitoring you have in place. Always consider the possibility of disability in long-term cases and how this could affect the employee ongoing in their work and in their employment career. Ensure communication throughout, seek medical advice where needed. Again, don't be afraid to seek medical experts because at the end of the day, they know more about the medical procedures and what we can do about it for the best. COVID-19 has put an extra complexity to absence management over the last 2 or 3 years, and care should be taken while managing this. It's still a learning process. We're still learning how to deal with long COVID, what it looks like, and how the symptoms can come about within an employee. So really just keep an eye on this and don't be afraid to change your procedures in line with this. Always look for support from us, from Clover or any other HR support you have in order to make sure you're following the procedures. And any legislation changes we'll update you on as soon as they come about. So I'm going to go through back to the Q&A now and look at the poll question, and I'm going to end the poll and see what the results are. So I'm going to share the results with you. So it appears that 50% have an absence management procedure in place and are being well managed. That is fantastic. 25% yes, but they're not being managed well. So really try and identify what's not being managed well and then maybe put some procedures in place in order to make sure it is. And then there's 25% no real absence management procedures and they need to improve. So again, can't stress enough how important it is. You might not have an absence issue at the moment. The minute you do, you'll need that absence procedure in place. So get it in place now while you don't need it, and then it's there for when you do. So thank you for listening today. I hope it's been useful. This is a quick stop of absence management. If there's any more you want to know, please do not hesitate to contact me. I've really enjoyed presenting this today to you. It's a subject I'm quite passionate about, and I want to ensure that employees are cared for, but employers know how to manage it as well, and it doesn't cost them in the business. So thank you for listening today. and I will end this webinar now. Thank you.